Okay, it's Sunday, July 7th, and it's looking like Endgame may actually have a chance at beating Avatar, whereas it didn't look like that before. And so what happened was over the weekend, Box Office Mojo put out a number of 8.9 million, which is quite a bump, puts it back into slot 8 in the US domestic market, and beating that other week. And chances are sales slowed down after the announcement of the re-release in anticipation for the re-release, but at the same time, people are still hitting that theater plenty good. And so when we look at the box office simulator, what this is a program that will apply real world performance, historical, to baseline numbers. For example, we know that this is the baseline number coming out of the box office for that sick opening weekend, and then the performance over the weeks after it was launched. These are the declining percentiles. So it will apply those same percentiles to the baseline number that just came out of Box Office Mojo, which is 8.9 million. Now I've padded that a little bit and I've just kind of rounded that up to 9 million just to give Endgame a little bit of an edge here, and we'll see if it can actually beat Avatar, because as according to other sources, it only has 16 million to go, and I have to shoot off to that topic just for a second now. You've seen that counter in that other channel that it's expecting us to believe that it has real-time access into the box office numbers, whereas Box Office Mojo doesn't even report real time. So I don't really believe that channel. I'm kind of new to YouTube, so I never take content from other people's channels. I don't know what the rules are, even though we use clips from videos all the time. When you take from another channel, I think that's a horrible thing to do. So I don't even want to show a screenshot of it. But if you look closely at the feed, you can see the donators are the same 3 or 4 names are going across constantly. It's the same names again and again. And so I don't really believe that channel, number one, because I don't believe they have real-time access into the box office, whereas Box Office Mojo doesn't even report real-time. And two, because that feed is a little suspicious as far as it's trying to get people to donate into the channel. It's up to you whether you want to believe that channel or not. But let's assume that it's for real. So according to that channel, it only has 16 million to go. And if we run this out, it will hit 16 million in this week, but it's basically going to freeze there, because once it gets down to this area here, when it's doing like only 20,000 a week, theaters are going to stop showing that movie regardless of what it is. And so I've actually run this out to 52 weeks because some people ask that question of, okay, what if it ran as long as Avatar? Would it make it? And so that's the answer to that, and I'll explain that at the end of this video. If you just want to see the numbers, let's get to it right now. So that's the 9 million, and if it's given enough weeks, then really we only need to make it to 16 here. That's basically it, because we know that they brought India online. India was not really the best place to go, because if we look at the different countries that we had a choice of, really, the last time India actually reported was on June 21st to the 23rd, so they didn't report the following week, and that's probably because it was only doing $5,000 in that country, in the entire country. So that I calculated it's doing that in probably less than 10 movie theaters, probably less than 5. I don't know what it's like in India. I don't know if they have mega theaters over there to the point where it might only be 3 or 4 theaters showing that movie. But we know that India only did a total of 61 million in its entire run. So that's the baseline that I did this calculation off of. So in the US market, it jumped it from the bottom about 2%. So I also rounded that up to give Endgame a little bit of an edge here. And so when we did that, it's up to 2%. And so that's what I applied here, is that India got as excited about it as the US did. And so that's 2% of 61 million. And that really basically nails the coffin shut, whatever, if you believe the 16 million offset. And chances are, I can't say for sure, because they're probably going off the Box Office Mojo number, because as of right now, Box Office Mojo is still reporting over 19 million. That's the offset as of this video. And so the 16, that just barely puts it into sights if it runs as long in India, but I really don't see that happening. So this is India based on US stats. If India gets as excited as the US did about it and does that jump of 2% of from its base, then we'll have a number of 2.2 million, and then that will end up being this number by the end of 52 weeks. So 16 plus that 2.2 million, 16, 17, 18. So 18 million definitely puts it past 16 million, but falls just short of Box Office Mojo's 19 million. So that's the bottom line. If it does as well as it did during its open, which chances are it's not, and I'll get to why it's not in a minute here. So this is India on India stats, not US stats. So according to the India stats, if we jump from 6.1 million, the actual decline from India is 0.00918%. So the most we can really expect to get out of India is only $500,000. And that might make the difference. That might make the difference because remember, these guys know what they're doing. This chart is the same way that those people in the boardroom look at the situation. They would not have reached out to India or other countries if they thought they could do it domestically, because there's a lot of negotiations that goes on there as far as are they going to actually do that. And if they had gotten China to come online with it, then they probably would have a slam dunk here. But they probably couldn't get into China for what it, explain it however you want. There's a bunch of theories out there. I'm not going to get into that. So that's the conclusion, is that Endgame will barely squeak past Avatar if you are to believe everything on Box Office Mojo. And so now, if that's all you wanted to know, you can leave now. It's fine. But the reason I don't really believe these numbers is because we're depending on Box Office Mojo. All right. And so Box Office Mojo is owned by IMDb. And according to right now, IMDb is owned by Amazon, but I'm pretty sure I saw that owned by Universal at some point. And you got to remember that all these people are in the same rich club, okay? They'll all do favors for each other because it comes down to who not only wants that title more, but needs that title more. Because when you launch a movie, you already saw in the trailers for the re-release, you already saw that it's from the #1 box office open of all time. So that's a real big trophy to take out into any trailer you're going to be putting out. But when we look at these numbers, the main thing that sticks out for me is everyone already reported less than 6 million. The initial reports, which is what I mentioned in my other video, we can't really believe those people jumping to those conclusions because Box Office Mojo hadn't even reported at that time. And everybody reported 5.5 million. And so this is nearly double that. And so either this is corrupt or they're all wrong. One way or another, we've got conflicting information out there, and so it's a matter of actually who you believe. And so I'm not even sure if I believe this Box Office Mojo either, because I'm a former IT guy as well, and I know that this number is quite simply changing a number in a DB. That's all it is. And so that's the pessimistic side of what these numbers actually mean. But when we go into India, the most we're ever going to squeeze out of them is 500,000 if it just does a 6 jump, because that doesn't sound like much until you consider that it was down to 5,000. So from 5,000 to 500,000, that's a really long stretch, people. So that's a really and that's why you see that number just absolutely freeze here. Is because according to even based on US percentiles, then it's just not going to do that. That's just absurd to think that India is going to get that excited that they're going to go from 5,000 to 500,000. That's like, let's say that you get $5,000 in salary a month, and then suddenly you walk into the bank with $500,000. That's just going to be looked at quite closely, not only by the bank employees. You either won the lottery or something like that, but more likely you were given that money somehow, or maybe some red light district transactions took place or something like that, which is why I'm very, very skeptical of actually both of these numbers. And so I know that for real that this simulator was applying real world numbers, but we have to base that off of these numbers that are coming out of Box Office Mojo, which I don't exactly believe. I really don't think, because I did the calculation on how many theaters there are out there, and there's only maybe 100 or so. Here, let's just do that again, because I did that previously. And so it is somewhat believable. So the difference is, I did that calculation wrong. So it is showing in only slightly less theaters than that week. So it's showing in less 136 theaters for that week, and I just based it on $10 a ticket. And so when you go into that theater, I calculated that it would only take another 100 people to go in, and so that is realistic. To if it had returned to that number, and they probably knew that also. So 100 more people in the theaters is not really unrealistic, but at the same time, I really just don't believe this 9 million, this jump, this sick. It's tripled. It tripled. Okay, so this number tripled. So I just don't really see that being realistic, in my honest opinion. After having looked at numbers for a very long time, I don't believe that. But it's up to you guys, and whatever gets reported is what everybody's gonna believe. And so that's the calculation for today. If it is actually doing that number, it will actually beat Avatar. It will just barely, barely squeak by. So these are the numbers according to the original performance. And what's really hurting it is what you're actually watching right now is YouTube, because a lot of people would wait to see on YouTube. With YouTube allowing piracy of those videos in the theaters, then a lot of people were able to see the end of credits scene and see that it's only a few minutes, and one of those minutes is, I think, one of the Russos talking about how they couldn't fit all the footage in. And straight up, I think that's dog shit. There were so many scenes in the movie that could have been cut back that I think we would have had a much, much better turnout, especially during the main run, but also during the rerun. Is that 3 hour runtime is a lot of people just weren't willing to wait 2 hours to get to that third hour, with the first hour being so slow. What a lot of people don't understand is that Hollywood is actually always working off of a formula, and it's always the same thing. You actually, sorry to spoil life for you here, but you're actually always going to be watching the same movie no matter what it is. It's always beat the bad guy is pretty popular, save the girl, and or get some type of trophy. Think about the Mission Impossible numbers, or movies rather. It's gone, or James Bond is actually a little bit better because it has a bigger history. So it went from get the tape, get the tape, get the tape, to get the disc, get the disc, get the disc, and now it's get the this, get the that, whatever. It's always get something, and or save the girl along the way. So James Bond would always get the girl. He always gets the women. Same thing for Cruise. He always hooks up with a hot chick, and then and or you're either capturing the bad guy or killing him, or a combination of the two. So that's the ending of all movies these days. Thanos, he's the bad guy. We gotta catch him, get the gauntlet. That's the end of your movie. You know how it's gonna turn out. And some people are gonna die along the wayside. That's our drama aspect of it. The reason I mention that is the third installment of a series, in this case the fourth, always has to be the longest. And I think that's what the Russos actually struggled with, is they were known for really dense and compact movies that really kept the action going, but then the execs from Disney came down on their heads and said, look, according to our formula that we've been using for over 80 years to influence the minds of children, the last installment has to be the longest. Think of all the ones in history, recent memory anyway, Matrix, the Star Wars series, all of them, and then Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, all of them, their last one is always the longest and the biggest and the most anticipated. And so the reason that that's important is what happened here is, I believe the Russos got trapped into that formula, so they ended up with a lot of filler time to make just barely squeak over the 3 hour mark. Because when you look at it on paper, then of course, the finale has to be the biggest, the longest, and the best. Whereas I think people would have been plenty satisfied with maybe a 2 hour 45-minute movie, having cut down on a lot of these really drawn out scenes that are in the first act completely. I would have preferred to have seen more of Hawkeye, definitely, because when the movie starts off with Hawkeye, we see basically just a little bit of ash left over. We don't see like his daughter like crumbling to ash in his hands. I think it would have been so cool if we had spent more time with Hawkeye in the beginning of the movie than we did jumping around to a lot of other BS scenes that were not. They could have been there. They just could have been shorter. Like the next scene is with Tony and Nebula. I was good to go with that until it was just dragging on with that recording going into that helmet. That was the only thing I knew about the movie going in, because I really wanted the maximum experience going into this movie. And so what happened there is the scene just ends up getting too long, and I forget what's after that. I haven't watched it that much to the point where I know every last scene. Oh yeah, they go to the trailer. The trailer music kind of set that tone for that first hour, and so that's why everything moves so slow. But the point being is, I think that 3 hour runtime not only put the Russos under pressure as far as we've got to make a movie that we've never really made before, as far as now we've got to stretch things out versus cut things down, because the best movies always have extended footage that they have to cut, and they're basically lying when they say they had so much extra footage that they couldn't fit in. And we know that they're lying about that because the Hulk scene is unfinished. Okay? So I've seen like 3 or 4 different versions of the post-credit scene just on YouTube. One of them was Galactus, and then you see, I think it's Mephisto, and then there's one just with Mephisto, and then Agent Hill and Fury, and then there's one of Hulk. So it could have been different in different countries or different regions, because we know that for different countries in Winter Soldier, then Cap is writing in a notebook while Falcon is talking to him, and he writes down a different thing in different countries. And so we know that at that time they went to that length to really relate to that audience, and I thought that was really cool. But in the case of Endgame, a lot of people are criticizing this post-credit scene with Hulk in that his mouth doesn't even move. It's really, really sad, actually. It's more of an embarrassment than anything. But that's that. And then I had seen the one with Galactus. And so I'm not even sure if that's like for real. Someone could have put that up and it's not even real, but we did see someone dressed as Galactus. I don't think we're going to be seeing him on a human size, but to put him on the screen and make it relatable, I guess that's what we've got to do. So that's the closing notes on this one. We will see what actually gets reported by the official media, because the official media actually only reported 5.8, but now Box Office Mojo is reporting 8.9, basically doubling that number. So it's really a matter of what source you want to believe at this point.